Hello, I am Jane Hughes, and this is the Chilled Parent Podcast, episode 5.
To become a chilled parent that has time for yourself, feels fulfilled and full of energy, can still pursue your personal goals as well as being a present parent with a great relationship with your kids, there are 5 skills you need to master. In this podcast, I take you through each one and share with you information, tips, and real-life stories about how we can implement these in our daily lives as working parents, so you can finally step into the joy of parenthood without losing yourself.
So today is going to be a short and practical episode. I'm going to dig into all of the different ways and examples that you can create space for yourself throughout your day and your week. So last episode, we talked about what creating space means and what it doesn't mean, why it's so important to do, and I hope that gave you some food for thought and you maybe experimented a bit this week with creating space for yourself and just checking in with yourself. Today I'm just going to run through a lot of examples. I asked sort of my clients, I asked the community, just asked people, what are your favorite ways to create space for yourself? And so I went through that list and picked out the best ones that I thought would be good to share with you here. I'm going to start off with really, really simple ones that anyone can do from anywhere, and then sort of work up to more kind of like fun ways that people like to do it, okay? So the first one I'm going to share is this idea. This is one of my friends who had this one. She said one of her best ways is like, she thinks of it as mini treats, she calls it, okay? So she will go and throughout her day, she'll create a couple of little moments where she either goes for a walk to get a Diet Coke or a coffee or a cup of tea, like whatever you want to do, but you just go and do that. And while you're doing it and while you're drinking it, you just take that time to check in with yourself. So rather than sitting and scrolling on your phone, which I think a lot of us do periodically throughout our day, if you think every time I pick my phone up and scroll throughout the day, if instead I created space and checked in with myself, how much more present and aware would I be of how I'm feeling? So yeah, this idea of mini treats I really liked because it's something that you can kind of look forward to as well, like you're attaching it to something else. So whenever you have a coffee break, tea break, or just go for a little walk for a Diet Coke, just take that time to think about like, how am I feeling and what am I thinking, and just check in with yourself and have space to process. Remember in the last episode, I talked about that computer analogy of all of the thoughts that we have being like new programs that we're opening on the computer or new tabs, and our brain really needs to process those things. So building in these little breaks throughout the day to just process rather than filling it with more information like what's happening on social media or, whatever else you kind of fill your time with will be really useful, okay? So mini treats is the first one. The second one is probably even easier. This is what I like to call the art of doing nothing. So sit down, or you can stand wherever you are, and just have a couple of minutes where you just simply do nothing. You just sit and you just think. And you just allow your brain to wander, okay? Now, there's a few different ways or a few different things that you can attach to this to make it maybe more enjoyable. I would say my favorite way to do this is where I live, I have a balcony. So we don't have a garden, but we have a balcony. And I like to do this at night where I can see the stars. So I sit on the balcony and I look at the sky and I just allow my brain to just wander for sort of 5-10 minutes. And it brings me so much peace. I think there's something about attaching nature to this. I know I get a similar feeling when I go to the beach and I look at water. I know one of my clients, she lives near mountains and she loves to walk to the top of these mountains and look and watch the sunrise or the sunset. And I know actually my sister-in-law is obsessed with looking at sunsets and sunrises as well. And there's something just quite spiritual about being in touch with nature like that. And there's a lot of scientific research coming out that being with nature, being in nature is actually so good for our health as well. So it makes a lot of sense that it feels so good. When I create space for myself, if I can attach nature to it in some way by going for a walk to one of my favorite spots, or as I say, just something as simple as sitting on my balcony and looking at the sky. If you have a garden, you could do that, or some people live near beaches or lakes, like having a little walk there and just looking and just thinking. Those are really powerful ways to do it. And there's something about that nature aspect that really brings the perspective side of things. Like I know I said in the last episode, we do this to create awareness, give ourselves perspective, and then be intentional, create intention. And I think the perspective piece is just really powerful when you attach this to something to do with nature. So you can do it anywhere though. You can do it in your home. You can do it in your office chair. And you just sit for 2 minutes and just think of nothing and just allow your mind to wander and watch what your mind thinks about. So that's a really easy one. And I call it the art of doing nothing. And maybe I'll write a book on it one day. Maybe it already is a book. I don't know. It sounds like it might be. Apologies if it is and I've stolen that phrase. Okay. The other one is diaphragmatic breathing. So for some people, breathing exercises can be really good. Just taking a few minutes to just take some deep breaths and just checking with yourself. Again, it can be done anywhere, in any location, and you can do it for as long or as little as you want. And I guess that's similar to meditation too. And I wanted to include meditation as one of the easier ones because I think when you know how to do it correctly, it is easy. Like meditation does not have to be sitting down and clearing your mind for an hour. And I obviously mentioned this in the last episode as well, but it can be as simple as just sitting where you are comfortably, closing your eyes and just noticing how you feel, noticing the sensations in your body, noticing the thoughts that you're having, noticing things that you can hear, feel, smell, just really building that awareness of what's going on around you in that moment. I mean, that's a very, very simple way to meditate and it can be done anywhere, anytime. So that was one that I wanted to include with the kind of really easy to apply examples of how to create space for yourself. So then we go to slightly more involved, but still pretty easy. So one of my clients said her favorite way is to kind of journal and then set 2 intentions for the day. And then she says like that's her kind of focus for the day, and anything else that happens on top of that is a total bonus. Journaling as well is such a great way to create space for yourself, because journaling, when you actually write down your thoughts and feelings, it helps to process your emotions. There's actually research on this that says it helps to process trauma. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go and write about a trauma or anything like that, but in studies that they've done where they've assigned journaling to patients who are undergoing treatments for trauma, the journaling has helped them to process. And I think that the reason for that is because it allows you to access your subconscious when you write. So it's really, really powerful. I know that often I'll give clients journaling questions and they'll be like, well, I thought about it, but it doesn't really have the same impact. Like you really need to write about it to uncover some of the things that are like driving your behaviors. But anyway, you can do this like as in depth or as easy as you want. So a very, very simple way to journal is to just do a bit of a brain dump. Just spend 5 minutes writing down the thoughts that are in your head, writing down exactly what you're thinking in that moment. And again, this is just a way to process your thoughts. As I said, back to the computer analogy again, you're just processing, closing those tabs. Now, I know that the client who suggested this, she loves to do this in the morning in her garden, which is lovely. Again, it's like attaching that nature side of it, but you can do this anywhere. Personally, I like to journal at night if I'm going to. And one thing that I wanted to mention here is that this is really powerful if you do struggle with sleep. So if you're one of those people I was talking about in the last episode that tries to sleep and your mind is racing, or you wake up in the middle of the night with a racing mind, trying this brain dump exercise before you go to sleep can be really powerful. I've had clients just be like, oh my God, I have had the best night's sleep ever the first time I did this. And so what you do is you just sit and free write. You just write whatever comes into your mind until you feel done. And that's it. It's that simple. Obviously, with the client that I was talking about there, she said she likes to set 2 intentions after she's done that in the morning. Remember, I said that the reason we create space is to create awareness. So she's doing that with the journaling and then get perspective and become intentional. So she's creating 2 intentions for the day. And she says that just means that anything else that happens on top of that in the day feels like such a bonus. And it just really helps to calm her mind throughout the day. So journaling is one. there's a couple of different ways you can do journaling as well. Like if you're not somebody who likes the idea of free writing, you can make it more structured if you want. So you could sit down and you could journal like 3 things that you're grateful for and 3 things that you want to achieve in the day. You can make it more structured if that appeals to you more. Another way that I like to use it, this is particularly good, and I'm sure I'll talk about this in further podcasts when we talk about managing your mind and self-compassion, but if you're somebody who is quite hard on yourself, like if you find yourself lying there at night sort of wishing things had gone differently or you'd done things differently, then a really great journaling exercise for you would be to write in your journal before you go to bed as if you're speaking to your friend. So write to yourself as if you're speaking to yourself like someone that you deeply, deeply love and care about. And just talk to them about what has happened in the day, what's happened in the week. Respond as if you were responding to someone you love. Might be your child, might be a partner, might be a friend. And that's a really good way to practice talking to yourself with self-compassion. And again, it will help to process and quiet your mind when you are ready to try and fall asleep. Okay, so, another client suggested these 2, which I thought were really beautiful, actually. She said that when she feels like her emotions are getting the best of her, like they're becoming a little bit high, she likes to just take herself out and go for a walk and just allow herself that space. And then she said, finding time to cry on my own, which I think is so lovely. And I think that the reason I find that so nice is that I think as mums, sometimes we just battle through and we don't really take the time to acknowledge how we're feeling, or we feel like we can't really show how we're feeling because we're surrounded by little people and we don't want to upset them. Even though I think it's healthy for them to see us process emotions, there are times when we perhaps maybe need to hold it in a little bit, or it's just not appropriate to just kind of break down into tears in the middle of nowhere. And often we would just kind of hold that in and then fill our day with busyness and forget about it. And then those emotions just sit there unprocessed. So making the time to cry when you feel you need to cry, I think is such a beautiful way to create space for yourself. And that I know is something that I have worked on myself over the last few years as well, because I was someone who definitely was a classic kind of like, if I ever cried in front of anybody, I'd be like, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. It's like, I don't know why I'm apologizing because I'm crying, but it just felt like so embarrassing. And I've tried to just work on allowing myself the space to cry, whether that is in private or in front of people that I care about. That's a focus for me. So when she said that, I was like, oh, that's such a beautiful one. I'm definitely including that in the podcast. So yeah, allowing yourself time to process those emotions, and just, again, go back to that computer analogy. Like if you have a tab open or something, like a circumstance that's happened that's made you feel a particular way, like really emotional, really upset, you need to allow yourself time to process that in order for your mind to shut that tab, okay? And I actually listened to a podcast the other day, and it was 2 men on the podcast, which was really nice. And they were talking about crying. One of them was saying that crying, learning how to cry, has been such an integral part of his healing journey and becoming who he is today. And he said that he's gotten to the point now where if something upsets him in the day and he doesn't cry, he gets frustrated because he knows it's like that release that he needs, and he knows how much better he's going to feel afterwards. And so, like, yeah, he gets frustrated at himself if he doesn't. And I think that says a lot, doesn't it? You know, like when we allow ourselves to cry and process, we do feel so much better afterwards often. So yeah, that's one, to give yourself time to process emotions in whatever way that needs to be. Okay, so then I'm going to move on to some ideas that take slightly more time, but are still really nice ways to just kind of be with yourself. I hope that from the first part of this episode, you've realized like it doesn't have to be a big involved thing. There's lots of small ways that you can create space for yourself throughout your day, throughout your week, regularly without very much effort at all. Okay, so there's really no excuse to not start to implement this if this is something that you need to do. But it is also fun to do sort of bigger things. And when you get to that place where you're like, yeah, I do have time to go and do these other things. Like, why not do them? So I wanted to share some of those too. So one of my clients said her favorite thing is to just go out and about and to explore a city. She really loves beer, so she likes to go and check out some breweries and just take herself out to explore. and just spend the day with herself, which is really nice. One of my friends said that she had a very similar one, and she's like, I like to take myself on a date night. I like to have a date night with myself. So she like gets things in to pamper herself, orders her favorite food. She'll maybe do some journaling. Just spending a night alone with herself can feel like, I feel like that feels really indulgent and really lovely and luxurious. So I wanted to include that one because I think it's such a fun idea. Then there's one of my clients said disappearing to Bali for a while. So Bali is kind of like her happy place, and she just loves the peace that it brings her. That's her favorite way to create a lot of space for herself, is to just disappear to Bali and just do some healing treatments and just really reconnect with herself. And like I said, it doesn't have to be this involved. These are obviously quite extreme examples, but I wanted to include them because when you get to that point where you make time for yourself, and actually interestingly, the client, and she definitely won't mind me sharing this, the client that says that was a client when we first started working together that literally didn't give herself 5 minutes in a day. I mean, she was so overwhelmed and overworked. So the fact that now she just takes herself to Bali on these like retreats almost to just relax, I think it's incredible. I think it's so good to see how things have changed and how she's prioritized herself in different ways. It's inspirational. I think it really is. So yeah, that was one of hers. Then we had people say things like yoga, meditation. And again, I think yoga is one of those ones where it depends on the class that you're doing. I think there are yoga classes that are much more focused on fitness, and there's going to be movement very, very regularly, and you have to focus on what you're doing. I wouldn't say that that's the best way to create space for yourself. It's an excellent form of self-care, but I wouldn't say it's like what I'm talking about when I'm talking about creating space. However, yoga classes, for example, like Kundalini, Yin yoga, where it's slow, it's deliberate, there's a lot of time there where you're like in the pose and you're focusing on breathing and just looking at what's coming up in your mind, 100%. Those are great classes to create space for yourself. And I know that I've been to some yoga classes that have been intense in terms of what they've brought up emotionally and yeah, just we went to one. I went with a couple of friends. I think it was last year, and it was Diwali. And our instructor was Indian, and so she had set out this nice class for Diwali, and she had put candles around, and it was dark, and we did this yin yoga class with the sound bowl. So it was like sound healing as well. And oh my God, it was like so relaxing, but it was also so emotional. There was so much emotion that came up. And like one of my friends came out of it. She just looked at me because I had suggested that we all go and do it because they'd been a bit stressed. And she looked at me and she was like, oh my God, Jane, that was like a healing for trauma. Like, what did you just bring me to? And she's just like, I'm just laughing, but it brings up a lot of emotion sometimes, those kind of classes. So they can be really great for connecting with yourself and just kind of checking in. And the last one was just like going for a walk. This was a really, really simple one. Maybe I should have mentioned it at the start, but just getting out and going for a walk. I think if you're a runner as well, I think a lot of runners describe this feeling. They just like to get out and run and just be with their mind. And it's a similar idea. So you just go and you walk or you run and you just be with your thoughts and clear your mind. And that's a great way to create space for yourself as well. Okay, so that's all my examples and my clients and my friends' examples, the ones that I wanted to share with you anyway, and that I think that you could easily implement. Not that you could easily implement just disappearing to Bali, but I thought it was good to include that one to give you like an idea of something you might want to work towards in the future. But yeah, that is the episode, and I hope that you've gotten some really sort of practical examples that you can go away and try this week. Let me know how it goes. Like if you start to implement this and start to try regularly creating space for yourself in the week, I would love to hear from you and to hear how it's sort of improving things for you and if it's helping you become more calm and relaxed. So get in touch. And yeah, I'll see you next episode. We're going to dive into thoughts that prevent you from creating space for yourself. So what are self-sabotages that you might come up against and how can we best overcome those? Okay? All right. Have a lovely week, everybody. I will speak to you soon. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Chilled Parent Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about me and my work, then come visit me at www.livelongandlush.com. That's live, long, and the full word, lush.com. Or connect with me on my Instagram or Facebook at Jane Hughes Coaching. That's Jane with a Y, Hughes, Hughes. See you next time.